time for you to testify, we're going to need to see you.
Yes, ma'am. I'll jump in as soon as you're ready for me.
Okay.
Okay. And what I'll just ask is that Mr. Ming and Mr. Robinson step back.
No, y'all do it right now. He's saying when I
Well,
call.
Officer Doyle is testifying, but I need to make certain that they're in a position where they can hear and observe. So for the record, this is going to be, I've already placed this on YouTube. I'm calling the case of State of Georgia versus Jerry Samir Ming Schraders, who's charged in warrant number 2022 CW 50153 with committing the offense of aggravated assault. He's also charged in warrant number 2022 CW 50154 with committing the offense of conspiracy to commit a crime. He's also charged in warrant number 2022 CW 50155 with committing the offense of false imprisonment, and charged in warrant number 2022 CW 50156 with committing the offense of inciting to riot. He's charged in warrant number 2022 CW 50157 with committing the offense of simple assault. And he's charged in warrant number 2022 CW 50158 with conspiracy to commit a crime. He's also charged with the same offense, conspiracy to commit a crime, in warrant number 2022 CW 50159, and charged in warrant number 2022 CW 50231 with felony tampering with evidence. Mr. Robinson, Mr. Ming is represented by Ms. Pleasant with the Public Defender's Office. Mr. Robinson is charged with warrant number 2022 CW 50110 with committing the offense of aggravated assault on a police officer. He's also charged in warrant number 2022 CW 50111 with committing the offense of aggravated battery. And he's charged in warrant number 2022 CW 50112 with conspiracy to commit a crime. He's charged in warrant number 2022 CW 50113 with committing an offense of false imprisonment, and charged in warrant number 2022 CW 50114 with and committing an offense of inciting a riot. Charged in warrant number 2022 CW 50115 with committing an offense of simple assault, and charged in warrant number 2022 CW 50116 with conspiracy to commit a crime. Finally, he's also charged with the same offense of conspiracy to commit a crime, warrant number 2022 CW 50117. Mr. Robinson is represented by Mr. Tolles, and the state is being represented by Ms. Freeman. Ms. Freeman, you are free to swear in your officer, and Mr. Robinson and Mr. Ming, would you just take a step back so that we can see the officer while he's testifying? Now, Mr. Ming and Mr. Robinson, you have a right to see, to be present, to see, hear, and observe these proceedings. If you're ever in a position where you cannot hear or observe the proceedings, please let that be known so that we can remedy this situation. Ms. Freeman, you're free to proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. And one correction, when Your Honor, when you read the charges for Mr. Robinson, 2022 CW 50110, I know on the calendar, it says aggravated assault upon a peace officer. I don't know why it says that. It is not upon a peace officer. It's an aggravated assault with a deadly weapon.
Okay. And Mr. Toles, do you concur with that?
I concur.
Okay. So we'll make that change.
Lieutenant Doyle, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear and affirm that the testimony about to provide in the cases of Jarius Graders Ming and Frederick Robinson will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
Please tell us your name and how you're employed.
Lieutenant Doyle with the Clayton County Sheriff Office.
Lieutenant, how long have you worked with the Clayton County Sheriff's Office?
It's going on 2 years now, ma'am.
And sir, were you working with the Clayton County Sheriff's Office on, let's see, on January 1st of 2022?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
And on that particular date, was there an incident occurred inside of the jail?
Yes, ma'am, there was.
And just for the record, what is the address of the jail?
9157 Terra Boulevard.
Is that in Clayton County?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
And were you on duty when this alleged incident occurred?
No, ma'am, I was not on duty when when the actual incident occurred. No, ma'am, I was not.
Okay. But when you came on duty, were you given information about an alleged incident to make a report or an investigation?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
Okay. Based on the information that you received for your investigation, tell us what happened regarding Frederick Robinson and Schrader's Ming.
Yes, ma'am. So I was asked to go and do an escort from the infirmary, which is our hospital health area inside the jail, transport a male back to housing unit 8. At that point, I made contact with an inmate and the victim, in this case, Davenport, Marquino Davenport. I was aware, I was seeing his injuries as we was walking, and I asked him about his injuries, and he told me that he was involved in a fight in housing unit 8, section 5, where he was jumped on by several males. He refused to tell me what actually occurred at that time due to people being around. However, we provided him a written statement, which he wrote a written statement of the incident that occurred. I went back and watched video footage of the incident that occurred, which led me to identify the individuals involved of the incident, and also based on his written testimonial and based on the physical evidence of his injuries, I was able to identify each subject involved in the fight in the housing unit, and also based on the video evidence that was in the housing unit. I interviewed each and every last one of these individuals individually. They all refused to speak, and they all wanted to have a lawyer present upon questioning. So at that point, I had enough probable cause to effect a warrant, and warrants was obtained for the injuries of Mr. Davenport.
Lieutenant Doyle, you stated housing unit 8, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that-
Housing Unit 8,
I'm sorry?
Housing Unit 8, Section 5.
And how many sections are in the housing unit?
It's 6 sections of each housing unit, ma'am.
Did this alleged incident happen in the one section of the housing unit?
Yes, ma'am. Just in that one section, Section 5. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned that there was video footage. Did the video footage capture the entire incident?
Yes, ma'am, it did. Would you like me to go in details of what I observed on the video?
Yes, please.
All right, so Marquino Davenport was inside of his cell. There's a couple of subjects a couple of subjects in the warrant that's not here right now. But Franklin Robinson, I'm sorry, I don't want to get the names mixed up because I don't have them in front of me right now. But 3 males, including Mr. Robinson and Mr. Ming, walked up to the cell where Davenport was inside of his room. Can I reflect back to my report so I can get this subject name?
Mr. Toles and Ms. Pleasant, do you all have an objection to that?
No.
He's needing to refer to the report to reflect his recollection.
Yes,
Just to
again,
the,
Okay, I have no objection to that.
Okay, without objection, sir, you can refer to your report to refresh your recollection.
yeah, so it was Franklin Ramon, Frederick Robinson, and Ming both approached the subject room. The victim room, which is Mr. Davenport. They swung a fist at Mr. Davenport. Mr. Davenport then tried to defend himself. At that point, he wasn't able to defend himself. Multiple inmates started coming from other areas of that section, section 5, entered into his room alongside with Mr. Robinson and Mr. Ming, and they started assaulting Mr. Ming into his cell, closing the door behind themselves. Mr. Robinson was observed coming out of the cell approximately 3 to 4 minutes later, coming out of the cell, going into his room, grabbing some item from underneath his mattress, placing it inside of his jumpsuit. He went into the room, closed the door behind himself. The incident continued to occur for 8 minutes. After the incident occurred for 8 minutes, everybody came out of the room, started running to their cells. On camera, you also see a weapon, or what appears to be a weapon, passed back to Mr. Franklin Robinson. He returned back to his cell, and at that point, they made him go back into his cell and close the door behind him, locking him inside of the cell, refusing him any medical treatment.
hey, Lieutenant, I want to go back some. I heard you say that you saw Mr. Robinson go into his cell, grab something, put something in his jumpsuit, and did he return back to the cell where Mr. Davenport was?
Yes, ma'am, he did.
Were you able to determine what Mr. Robinson retrieved from his cell?
So I wasn't able to physically see on camera what that item was. However, Davenport was able to determine that the item that he was being stabbed with was something similar to an ice pick. After we did a search of the housing unit due to his incident and due to his injuries, after we was able to do a search of the housing unit, we was able to find where the weapon was. We located the weapon, secured the weapon into evidence. But prior to that, I had no knowledge of where the weapon was hitting. So I went back and watched camera footage to see where the item was hitting at in the section. And I was able to determine that Ming was the one that hid the weapon inside the bathroom near the toilets. This is why he was also charged with tampering with evidence.
Were you or anyone else in the sheriff's office able to retrieve that weapon?
Yes, ma'am, we was. It's actually placed in evidence at this point.
And can you give us a description of what the weapon was?
It was a piece of metal, looked like it's commonly used in the light fixture of the jail, and it was sharpened at the very tip to be more of like a shovel, but very, very small. If I can give an example of what it looked like.
What injuries did Mr. Davenport sustain as a result of this?
Mr. Davenport sustained a stab wound to the left cheek of his face, stab wound to the back of his neck, and also a stab wound to the cheek. So it's one right below the eye, one to the back of the neck, and one to the cheek. 3 stab wounds.
Did he have to be transported to the hospital?
So according to the doctors here, they said that he did not have to be transported to the hospital, that they can care for his injuries here, but he was kept up on the supervision of the doctors here in the infirmary. He also had contusions to both eyes, which I did have pictures. I did take pictures where his eyes was nearly closed shut, swollen red. It was very bad injuries.
Lieutenant Doyle, you stated from the video footage, you could see that several other inmates started to come in and assault or hit Mr. Davenport. About how many in total inmates were involved in this?
So it was a total of 8 inmates. What I did was I went and got a photo lineup of every inmate into the section that's assigned to Housing Unit 8, Section 5. I showed the whole entire photo lineup to the inmate, Mr. Davenport. Mr. Davenport was able to put a check mark on every individual that he observed strike him. And he also wrote on the lineup on individuals that actually stabbed him. So he actually was able to see, based on his testimony and based on his check marks on the photo lineup of the individuals that actually stabbed him, the individuals that actually assaulted him.
And Lieutenant Doyle, and I know you stated that none of the inmates who were involved wanted to speak. Were you able to get any statements from any other witnesses to what happened to Mr. Davenport?
Yes, ma'am. I was only able to get a statement from the roommate, but the roommate really wouldn't tell me much. The only thing he was able to do was to identify one of the individuals that I wasn't able to identify on video.
Doyle, just so we understand, because I know you stated that the inmates went into Mr. Davenport's room, and I think you stated that somebody closed the door behind them. Can you describe to us when you say his room, what that was set up like?
Yes, ma'am. So there's 8 rooms on the bottom, 8 rooms on the top. Inmate Davenport was assigned to 1608, which would be the last room to the far right. Mr. Davenport was secured inside his room on the incident, and upstairs on the top tier to the bottom tier to go inside of his room.
During this incident, were you able to determine whether or not Mr. Davenport was able to leave?
Yeah, based on the video evidence, Mr. Davenport was not able to leave. When he came outside of his cell, they made him go back into his cell, even on the video footages and also on Mr. Davenport's testimony, is that they made him go back into his cell. On video, they made him go back into his cell. As he ran to the door to get help, they came down, made him go back into his room, went to his room, talked with him for about 45 seconds to 50 seconds, and then closed his door and locked him inside of his cell. At that point, he wasn't able to exit out of his room at no point in time until a CO came in and went to his room to actually check on him. And then that was when they made aware of his injuries. And then then the CO was able to get him aid rendered to him.
Lieutenant Doyle, when you say that they made him go back into the room, can you tell us how they made him go back into his room?
So they was threatening him, telling him that this is Davenport's testimony, according to Ms. Davenport, that they was threatening, telling him that he better go back in the room or they're gonna beat his ass again, was the words that was used.
One second.
Take your time.
Lieutenant Doyle, around what time of day was this?
So this happened at, can I reflect back to my report, ma'am?
Yes, if you need that to refresh your recollection, yes.
So this originally happened on I can recall correctly, it was January 1st, which was New Year's at approximately 9:00 p.m.
During this time, were the inmates allowed to walk around freely in the
No, ma'am.
housing units?
No, ma'am, in this particular section, ma'am, housing unit 8, section 5, they're on security, they're on disciplinary, which means they're not even to be out at all unless they was told by an officer to be out. So these doors particularly did not secure, or they popped out of their doors. But housing unit 5 is security. For whatever reason, they got in trouble and got put into that housing using that section.
You say popped out of their doors. Can you tell us what you mean by that?
Yeah, so they use probably clothing or sheets or things of that nature to reach it into the door where it looked like the door is closed, but they are popped the locks.
Is the video footage, is that in evidence?
I have it on a flash drive, ma'am.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, so Ms. Pleasant and Mr. Tolles, whomever wants to go first, I'm gonna leave it up to the two of you.
Mr. Tolles, go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Let's see. Can you hear me, sir?
I can, so yes, sir.
Okay. So the incident occurred on January 1st, correct?
Yes, sir.
When did you first become aware that anything had occurred?
I believe it was on January 3rd when I returned back to work, sir.
And no one else in the sheriff's department had done any investigation into this matter?
There was only an email sent up with the pictures of his injuries, and just an email notification was sent up. So I'm not sure if anybody else had took lead in the investigation, but I did when I got here, when I found out about it.
Okay. And you first got into it when you was escorting him from the infirmary back to housing unit 8?
Yes, sir.
And then as at that time that Mr. Davenport indicated to you that he did not want to go back to housing unit 8?
Yes, sir.
Okay, did he give you a reason what led up to these to the hostilities in the cell?
So he did not give me any reason. I asked him why, and he did not give me any reason on why this would have occurred or did occur.
Okay, but he stated that he was in his cell and he was approached by 3 men.
That's what I seen on camera. He described it as inmates came to a cell and he was overpowered by inmates, which was the words that he used.
Okay, well, what you saw was not that many people, but only 3 people.
3 people, but shortly after, within seconds, you have 4 or 5 more people come into his room.
Okay, and you said somebody threw a punch?
Yes, it was Ramon Franklin. He threw the first punch to Davenport. And Davenport tried to defend himself, but then that's when Franklin and Ming came in and then began to and then started to jump.
On the video to see what was said before punches were thrown?
Say it one more time for me.
Is there any audio on your video surveillance that could help us determine what was said before the first punch was thrown?
No, there's no audio. There's no audio on the camera, sir.
Okay.
To determine what was said prior to the punch being thrown.
So Mr. Ramon was part of the 3 people that went to the cell to speak with Mr. Davenport?
Yes.
And it is still your testimony that it was Mr. Ramon that threw the first punch, correct?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Davenport threw punches back, correct?
It looked like he tried, sir, but he wasn't able to strike anybody, according to the video evidence.
But he did throw a punch, correct?
I will have to go back and watch the video on that one. Like I said, he did not strike anybody when he had any movement and back into his cell.
And after the incident, At no time, how long after the incident was Mr. Davenport taken to the infirmary?
Sir, the fight incident took 8 minutes of him being assaulted inside the cell. After that, that's another, once they secured the door, I actually can go, I look at my report to see what time he actually was rendered aid by the officer internal section. I'll have to go back to my report to give you that answer.
But you do not have an answer to that right now when he was taken to the infirmary after
No, I do not have,
after the fight?
no, I do not have an answer for you right now, but I can look at my report and see if I put it in there on what time he was actually taken to the infirmary.
Okay. And Mr. Davenport did not require hospitalization, correct?
According to the doctor, it was something that we can care for here. No, sir.
Did not require any surgery, correct?
No, sir. I
You
mean,
said-
that's gonna be on the hospital. I don't know, sir. I don't know. I don't know if he was sent out later for any, I don't know what was taken care of afterwards, after I took him to,
Right.
I mean, after I seen him.
But the evidence that you're bringing forth to this court, there's no evidence of that, correct?
That he was taken to the hospital?
Yes.
No, sir.
Or that he was performed any surgeries, correct?
No, sir.
You receive any stitches?
Not to my knowledge, sir.
Okay. So who made the determination that he was in fact stabbed?
That was based on his testimonial and based on that was based on his testimonial, sir. Based on the weapon that was also recovered. And
Okay.
based on the puncture wounds in his neck, his face, and near his eye.
Okay, so that wasn't confirmed by the doctor you spoke to, correct?
No, he did not say whether yes or no, those were stab wounds.
Okay. All right, so, and it was only when Mr. Davenport was headed back to Section 8 was when he told you basically he didn't want to go back there, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. At no time prior did he report this incident to any other officer, correct?
Cannot answer that question, sir, because I do not know.
Okay, but you don't have any evidence that he did that, correct?
I know, sir.
In fact, he didn't even report it to
Oh,
you.
yes, I do. I stand
Okay.
corrected. Yes, I do, because there was an email notification sent in regards to the incident that happened in House Unit 8, Section 5. So it was reported to somebody because there was a notification sent up in regards. So that's how I was able to obtain the actual pictures for his injuries that happened on the particular date. And I have pictures on the injuries that sustained when I made contact with that report.
Okay. You stated that in your report that you were asked to assist with the transport of 3 inmates from the infirmary, correct?
Sir, I
That's-
was.
In the case, correct?
I'm chopping up a little bit, sir.
Okay. No one above you tasked you with investigating any fight at the jail, correct?
No, sir, no one tasked me.
Okay. And so
I am.
you basically observed injuries to Mr. Davenport and just asked him what happened, correct?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. He didn't initiate that conversation with you, correct?
No, sir, he did not.
Okay. Judge, that's all the questions I have.
Your Honor, if I may. Lieutenant Doyle, I am Tiffany Bower Pleasant, and my questions are regarding my client, Mr. Ming Schraders.
Hold on one second. Hold on one second, Ms. Pleasant. I'm sorry.
Okay,
I muted myself. I was just going to say that I was going to allow you to ask your questions before Ms. Freeman gets an opportunity to redirect, just so that it could be a whole global thing if she has any questions on redirect. So I apologize, but go for it.
thank you, sir. With regards to my client, Mr. Ming Schraders, Specifically, what is Davenport alleging his role was in this incident?
Mr. Davenport was alleging that Mr. Mean did not stab him, but however, he was one of the guys that was punching him, assaulting him with his fist.
And specifically, what did you observe on the video related to Ming Schrader's in this incident?
Based on the video evidence, ma'am, only thing I can testify here today is that Mean entered into the room that Mr. Davenport was assaulted in. Based on the video evidence, I did not physically see Mean assault Davenport, but I got that testimonial evidence from Mr. Davenport when he selected Mr. Mean out of the photo lineup. And on the,
I'm
on
sorry,
the camera
continue.
footage, yes, ma'am, on the camera footage, you see Mr. Mean hide the weapon used in the day room near the toilets of the section, housing unit 8, section 5.
And what is the date of this camera footage with regards to the weapon?
The weapon is going to be on January 2nd, which was the following day.
And how are you certain that this is the same weapon that was allegedly used in this incident?
I mean, it was the only weapon used and only weapon found in the whole entire housing unit when we did a search of the location after a subject stated he was stabbed. We searched every room, we searched every part of the jail, every part of that particular section looking for a weapon.
Has Davenport viewed this weapon?
Davenport has not viewed the weapon, but based on his testimony and evidence about a ice pick, the weapon appeared to be something similar to what he considered an ice pick.
And to your knowledge, did the weapon that was recovered contain any blood or body tissue?
So we have not submitted that weapon to GBI for any testing at this point.
Do you have any video that shows how Ming Schrader's obtained the weapon?
So the video footage isn't entirely where you actually just see him walk from a room to the bathroom area in the day room and hide the weapon up under the toilet or the sink for approximately 2 to 3 minutes.
And what room is he walking from in the video?
He's walking from, I would have to go back and give you the room number, ma'am. I don't have the room number on top of my head right now.
Do you know who is housed in that room?
I do, ma'am. It's Mr. Franklin Robinson.
Okay. But it's your understanding from Davenport that Ming Schrader's only role is that he struck him allegedly.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, Ms. Freeman, do you have any redirect?
No additional questions, Your Honor. The state rests.
Okay, may this officer be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Lieutenant Doyle.
Yes,
Thank you,
sir.
sir. You can be
No problem, sir.
excused.
Appreciate it.
Does the defense have any evidence that they plan to present?
Not on behalf of Mr. Frederick Robinson.
Okay,
Not on behalf of Mr. Ming Schrader, Your Honor.
so we just have argument, and I'm assuming, Ms. Freeman, you're gonna wait to rebut.
That's correct, Judge.
Okay, so I'll leave it. I'll go with Mr. Tolles first, since he was first person to cross-examine Lieutenant Doyle.
Thank you, Judge. On behalf of Mr. Frederick Robinson, Judge, I believe a number of these charges should be dismissed. What we have here is a fight in a so-called high security part of the jail. I think it's completely inexcusable that there could be a fight like this for 5 to 8 minutes, and there'd be no response from the sheriff's department in this particular case. It's really kind of sad to see that in American correctional facility, in a county jail, that would occur. But at the end of the day, Judge, we have a Mr. Ramon approaching Mr. Davenport in this wing with these guys that are supposed to be, I guess, problems or whatever. And he takes a punch, he throws a punch, and then Mr. Davenport throws a punch, and then, more people throw punches. And then next thing we know, we have a false imprisonment in a prison, which is, I think, it's a false charge, Judge. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to have a false imprisonment in a prison. They're already in a prison. Then you have aggravated battery, which would require serious disfigurement. The man said he had some pictures. He didn't produce them. There's no proof of any serious disfigurement. Also, it could be proved by loss of use of a member of your body. I didn't hear anything. He said his eye was nearly closed. He didn't say it was all the way closed, or he lost the use of his eye. He said it was nearly closed. So there's no evidence of an aggravated battery. There's definitely no evidence of inciting to riot, a fight in a jail where punches were thrown. There's nothing that showed that these men were, by doing any actions, were trying to incite some type of riot in the jail. There's multiple conspiracies to commit crimes, but there's no evidence that prior to the case in question, that anyone had made an agreement to fight or punch or do anything. The evidence shows that it was, if we're just looking at the evidence, that it was a completely spontaneous situation, again, in a high security jail with people that already have problems, where punches were thrown. Then there's an aggravated assault. The officer stated that with a deadly weapon. Again, no picture was provided to this court showing that this weapon, this quote unquote ice pick type thing, was a deadly weapon. Clearly, whatever was used wasn't capable of killing, as they said he had multiple what they called stab wounds that wasn't substantiated by any doctor, but no evidence that this man received any stitches, no surgeries, nothing, and they were about to return him back to the cell. So where is the evidence that the quote unquote ice pick was a deadly weapon? There is none. It might have been some kind of weapon, but that could be anything. But to say that it's a deadly weapon, and this person was allegedly perhaps assaulted with this thing and didn't even get any stitches, it doesn't hold. There's been no probable cause to show that. I have a simple assault or an intimidation here. But again, Judge, what we have here is a fight at the jail. This is the second case I've had this year, similar situation, where, there's a fight that just, for whatever reason, and I've been to the jail as an attorney. I don't know how you don't see that. I could see that from my attorney booth. I could see that when I walk into the visiting area of the jail to see if somebody's fighting, or it doesn't make any sense that the sheriffs would not see this. So this is a failure on their part. These things happen at the jail. These are inmates at the jail. There will be fights. But we don't need to trump up the charges to false imprisonment and aggravated battery and conspiracy when there's no evidence of that existing. If any charges need to be bound over at this point, Judge, it would be a battery for visible injuries to Mr. Davenport, but aggravated battery, there's no evidence of serious disfigurement or loss of use of body. Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, again, Judge, no evidence of that the pick. And again, they had the opportunity. I don't know if Mr. Davenport's still in the jail. They could have called him. They chose not to. They called a lieutenant. So everything through him is secondhand, through a witness that was didn't even come forward. Mr. Lieutenant Doyle initiated the entire investigation. He was only supposed to take him back to the cell. And then he starts questioning him, looks at the video, and comes up with all these charges against 9 people. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Judge, we just can't afford these types of cases keep coming through magistrate court every time somebody gets in a fight at the jail. So I'm going to ask the court to dismiss all the charges and perhaps bind over a lesser included charge of battery. If the state still wants to indict and prosecute jail cases, fight at the jail cases, then they can do so through a grand jury and indictment. But I don't feel like that the court, it's in the court's best interest to be trying to litigate every incident at the jail. So that's my argument on behalf of Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Toles. Ms. Pleasant?
And Your Honor, I would adopt the argument by Mr. Toles, particularly with regards to the aggravated battery, as there was no evidence that there was any loss of use of any body part belonging to Mr. Davenport. There's absolutely no evidence that my client participated or incited a riot in this case. And there's no evidence of any acts that would rise to the level of a conspiracy. Even with regards to the alleged video that Lieutenant Doyle testified, where my client was allegedly observed hiding an item in a bathroom that was recovered. My question specifically was this item shown to Mr. Davenport? So there's no identification of the item that was recovered by the Sheriff's Department as being the alleged weapon that was used against Davenport. So the tampering with evidence charge should fail as well. My client is guilty of throwing a punch. And so based upon that, I would ask that that charge be bound over to state court for further prosecution and the other remaining charges be dismissed. Thank you.
I would say, Ms. Pleasant, your client is guilty of allegedly throwing a punch.
Judge, we're going to ask that all the charges for both of these defendants be bound over. The testimony of Lieutenant Doyle regarding the injuries, Mr. Davenport sustained several stab wounds. He also suffered contusions to both eyes. He had to be taken to the infirmary, even though Lieutenant Doyle cannot testify as to whether or not he had to get stitches or any kind of surgery. He indicated that the doctors there in the infirmary said that they would be able to treat him. We believe that certainly that is enough to sustain the aggravated battery. The testimony of Lieutenant Doyle from when he viewed the video surveillance, it showed the inmates going into Mr. Davenport's room. He also testified that they would not allow him to leave. And he stated that, yes, Mr. Davenport tried to throw a punch, but he couldn't tell if he was successful for the number of inmates that were assaulting him. He testified about Mr. Robinson going and retrieving something from his cell, putting it in his jumpsuit, returning, and that this weapon was used on Mr. Davenport, Your Honor. Lieutenant Doyle testified that from watching the video surveillance, they were able to determine Mr. Mean he placed this item or tried to hide this item in a bathroom, I believe he stated. With all of these inmates, Judge, certainly there is enough to charge all of them with inciting a riot. They assaulted this young man in his cell. So we're asking that all of the charges for Mr. Ming as well as Mr. Robinson be bound over to Superior Court.
Thank you all. There are going to be some cases, charges I'm going to dismiss and some charges that are going to go forward. But I would like to say that Mr. Toles wins the word of the day or phrase of the day of false imprisonment within a prison. I never thought about it in that way, and you made me think about it in a different way. The aggravated assault charge I am going to, for Mr. Robinson, the aggravated assault charge is gonna be bound over to Superior Court. The aggravated battery is gonna be dismissed. I didn't hear any evidence to support a aggravated battery charge. The conspiracy to commit a crime is gonna be dismissed, both of those charges. Also, because I didn't hear evidence of a conspiracy. They may have acted in concert, but I didn't hear any evidence that there was a conspiracy. False imprisonment, Mr. Tolles has taught me to rethink in false imprisonment within a prison. That I think that has some validity. So
Judge, the Lieutenant Doyle testified that Mr. Davenport tried to leave and they didn't allow him to leave. Regardless of they're in a jail facility, it still doesn't give these inmates a right to prevent this individual from leaving.
And that's true. And the way that Mr. Tolles phrased it made me think about it in a different manner. If they're prevented from leaving, and then someone prevents them from moving out of the space that they're prevented from leaving, is that false imprisonment? And they didn't have I'm gonna bind that over. I think that's an interesting argument, and that's something that needs to be further fleshed out. Inciting to riot, that's going to be dismissed. Let's see. Simple assault, that's going to be bound over to Superior Court. And conspiracy to commit a crime, the last two of those conspiracies, I'm going to dismiss those. I didn't hear testimony that there was an agreement to act. They may have acted in concert, but I didn't hear any testimony that there was an agreement to act. So as it relates to Mr. Robinson, the aggravated assault is going to be bound over, which is 2022 CW 50110. False imprisonment is going to be, I'm sorry, hold on. I missed the page. Yes, false imprisonment, which is 2022 CW 50113. That's going to be bound over. And the simple assault is going to be bound over. So it's three of those offenses, which is 2022 CW 50115. Now let's go to Mr. Ming. This is going to be a more sort of interesting case. Miss Pleasant elicited testimony from Lieutenant Doyle that Mr. Ming was on camera, not stabbing, but punching. I'm going to largely do the same thing I did with Mr. Robinson under a theory of party to a crime. And so the aggravated battery is going to be dismissed. The conspiracy to commit crime is going to be dismissed. False imprisonment is going to be bound over under party to a crime theory. Inciting to riot is going to be dismissed. The simple assault is going to be bound over. And the 2 conspiracy to commit crimes are going to be dismissed. There was testimony from Lieutenant Doyle that Mr. Ming was observed on video with hiding the alleged weapon that was used. So that will be bound over in Mr. Ming's case. So I think that's it.
I think that's it, Judge.
Well, that was fun. That was got the mind got a little bit expanded. Mr. Toes taught me something. Mr. Toes, is that the last case that you have here today? I did see emails come over of your other cases where things were resolved.
It is. My other case is resolved. This is my last case.
Okay, so you may be excused, sir.
Thank you. I had a good time.
Okay.
The officer is on for Arnold.
Arnold.
Yes,
And Mr. Arnold, is that the last case we have today?
it is.
Okay, so let's bring it on. Is that Mr. Baker?
Yes.
Okay,
And Judge, well, I'll wait till after we do this hearing when we go off of YouTube. I did want to ask a question, and even with Ms. Pleasant on, so, but I'll do it after we finish this hearing, since we're still on YouTube.
yes, ma'am. Just remind me, and you're free as always to ask whatever question or to give whatever piece of advice, because Lord knows I need it. Okay, let's bring up Mr. William Arnold at the jail. And Mr. Baker, you can unmute yourself and turn your video on. Thank you, sir. Let's see. Okay, Mr. Arnold, sir, we're about to have your preliminary hearing. You're being represented here by Ms. Pleasant. Although you have the right to say anything that you want to say, it's generally not a good idea to say anything without speaking to your lawyer first. So if it ever comes an issue where you believe that there's something that you need to have a conversation about, it's better for you to speak to Ms. Pleasant about it first, so that she can help you through that process. But for the record, I'm calling the case of State of Georgia versus.
Judge, one moment. Can you place me in a breakout room? He's raising his hand, so I just want to verify what he needs before we get started. Just briefly, please.
No problem. Let's unmute at the jail. Let's unmute.
It's on mute, sir.
Mr. Arnold, do you need to speak to Ms. Pleasant?
1 second.
You okay? I'm gonna place you, Ms. Pleasant, in breakout room 2 and allow Mr. Arnold to have whatever conversation he needs to have with you. Okay.
I see. I still have it, so I'll just